Hi everyone, my name's Aubrey Smith, and for my project, I chose Japan as my country that I wanted to research and learn about. So without further ado, let's get started. Japan is a country rich with unique culture, one where an entire country mends its differences over cuisine, art, and a very long, deep-rooted history, which I believe enhances and highlights their colorful and very fresh cuisine. Let's get into the history. For thousands of years, Japan used a feudalist approach to government, which basically means that there was a lord or a king, and then under that there was like some sort of noble, and then under that would be like peasants and normal like townspeople, the majority of the population. So that being said, peasants would become farmers and they would grow all the crops for their region and they would have to meet a quota of sorts to basically pay rent in a sense. To put it into modern terms, they would have to grow a certain amount of rice for their daimyo, which is like their noble, and pay them in rice, and the daimyo would then pay the shogun, which would be the lord or the king. So rice was a form of currency, and the peasants were responsible for all that agriculture. They grew rice, like I said, but they also grew soybeans and buckwheat. The field people, the peasants, they wouldn't be able to eat the rice actually. They had to use it strictly just for currency. They never got to really eat it, so they were eating mostly buckwheat, which is what soba noodles are made out of, which is a very common dish in Japan that goes back thousands of years. Um, that being said, though, buckwheat isn't really nutritiously fulfilling, so a lot of the times the farm people they would get ill and die, unfortunately. But since then, times have changed, but that was how things were for thousands of years in Japan. So agriculture then, like I said, the peasants had to do everything. They were out on the field for very, very long hours. That was pretty much all they did, other than like housework and chores, which women would usually do. Women were also responsible for harvesting the rice mostly, and it was all done by hand. And like I said, it was like a quota they had to reach to be able to stay where they were, and stay part of the village. That was the main form of currency. A lot of people bartered a lot of crops. They would grow other crops other than just what the mayo wanted them to, and they would barter those. Now everything's done by farmers who choose their career. Machines are used for planting and harvesting, much like American agriculture. Everything is done in very high volume and production. We have a lot more knowledge to use chemicals to help regulate insects and pests and things like that. And farming, they're not just farming for their small village now. A lot of places, yes, they are still, but they also sell and export to different countries all around the world. So, some indigenous ingredients, which I thought were pretty interesting. A lot of them go into soups and salads, I've noticed. Some are used for raw fish preparation, like sushi or sashimi. So, bear with me. I'm going to try my best to pronounce these for you guys, but no promises that they're correct. But shisho is a Japanese basil. Um, In Japan, they have a lot of flat ground in the valleys, which they usually grow in. So you can find a lot of these there. Shisho is one of those. Mizuna is a mustard green, kind of similar to arugula. It's used a lot like arugula in place of it. Mitsuba is a Japanese parsley, again with the herbs. They tend to grow a lot of herbs over there. A lot of them they compare very closely to like what I describe them as, but a lot of them might be just more bitter or more sweet, but very similar in taste. Wasabina is a mustard green again, kind of like arugula. It's used a lot in soups. Takasa, I'm sorry, bear with me. Takanasume is a chili pepper. These aren't just grown just in Japan, but they're used so widely in their culinary expertise that I thought I should include it. Burdock root is similar to like a potato, if I had to compare it. It's very, it's like an apple. Like, it's just very fibrous on the outside because it is a root, it's underground, and then it's used as potatoes a lot. I wouldn't go making mashed potatoes with it, but they do put it into soups and salads and things like that. Negi is like a scallion. It's in the onion family. Wasabi, a lot of us are familiar with, which is that green horseradish paste that you usually find with the sushi platter. Japanese hornwa is again wild parsley. It's very similar, but this it's not as like uniform and regulated as mitsuma. Um, Migoma is ginger, which is also goes in many, many, many dishes and goes on top of sushi preparation a lot. So for the protein, basically in Japan, they have so many coastlines that it gives them such a wide array and variety and access to seafood all the time, year round. So they're mostly known for their fish, and they just prepare it as simple as possible to stick with tradition usually. So with protein, basically going to the fish market every morning isn't unheard of. It's kind of like going to school every day. It's part of their routine. They grab what they need for the day. They don't grab what they need for a week like we do, like at Costco or something like that, and we stock up. They get just what they need for that day or maybe 2 days, but they never really stock up because it's fresh fish. So they visit that every day. A lot of them, the salmon and tuna, which Americans are very familiar with, they do have a bunch of crazy fish that I've never even heard of. But I felt like this would be the best visual for us. So salmon, tuna, squid, octopus, and eel are main sources of protein. So in Japan, they uphold tradition, like I said, and they honor it with their respect for their ancestors. They actually have like a tea ceremony that is practiced for years and years and years until you get down properly with all the nuances in it. Um, that being said, a lot of the times, like I said, soba noodles are served, ramen, tempura, ugagi, which is fried eel, sashimi, which is fish atop of rice, and then sushi, which is like a sushi roll that you would think of, something prepared with nori and other toppings inside. They mostly display that I've seen mostly the raw cooking technique. It's not really a cooking technique, but it's a method of preparation, I guess I would say. And then moist heat cooking a lot for their soups and stews and things like that. So on America, I can say personally, Japan has well, not infected, influenced me quite a bit. So I am pretty in touch with this. A lot of America is starting to catch on to Asian cuisine in general, with a focus in Japanese cuisine, I'd say. Sushi places are starting to pop up everywhere. Poke bowls, which is of Japanese descent from Hawaii, is starting to pop up everywhere. So sushi has been adopted into America like one of its own dishes. Um, More so, I'd say, than any Japanese dish. Chef Masa Takamima of Manhattan's Sushi Shrine is probably the person that I think of the most when I think of an American in Japanese cuisine. He runs the first three-star sushi restaurant in America, and he serves fish directly to his customer, which I thought was very interesting. He makes every slice fresh with hot rice and serves it. Usually, every time I've had sushi, at least, it's been cold, like cold rice. But he does it right away, right in front of you, and prepares it. And that service is so intimate, and it just makes the customer remember, which is really important. Not just the food, but with the food, there are many traditional nuances that Chef Masa translated so well in his American clientele. And it keeps everyone coming back. He really pays attention for every small detail, every precise cut. Sushi is a very hard skill to master. It takes many people a lifetime to get all the cuts correct. Because fish is just such a delicate protein to work with, you really have to know what you're doing. So I think that he's pretty surreal. So in Japan, I'm going to use my little cursor now. Japan is right here. It has about like 3,000 islands off the main coast. but you can see how close it is to South Korea and North Korea, along with China and Mongolia, and Indonesia's down here. Taiwan, Philippines, they all kind of have something to do with Japan in their cuisine. They all are very, very big on rice. A lot of them, rice is like the core of their cuisine. So I noticed that, along with a lot of the spices and things, and even dishes, they'll have like the same dish, but it'll be called something different and then adjusted with a few different spices, but it'll be like pretty much the same thing. This is most common in seafood I've seen. They do a lot. Or even tea. A lot of them drink tea, I've noticed as well. A lot of black tea, matcha tea, things like that have been kind of floated around throughout that area here. So I was looking for a like authentic, not Americanized at all, Japanese restaurant in Japan, but I couldn't really find one. Um, so I found the Marriott, which is like a high-end hotel, I guess you could say, and this was the restaurant in the Marriott. So here that you can see like they have Japanese characters as well as the English characters, which made it helpful for me. My brother speaks Japanese pretty fluently, but I couldn't tell you anything. So he helped me out a little bit with this, but then we found the one with both English and Japanese, so that was nice. So sashimi, like I explained earlier, is just the fish here on top of rice, and then it's usually dressed with like a sauce. So in this case, it's soy sauce, and the garnish they don't specify, but it's probably like something like either maybe roe if we're really out there, or ginger or wasabi, and they put that on the side for you. The simmered dish, like I said, moist heat cooking is pretty popular. So this is the steamed eel and lotus root with snow crab meat, fungus, and a special sauce. I've noticed they don't really like to explain in depth their contents of their sauce. I don't know if that's like a kitchen trade thing or if that's like a personal like chef thing. They just don't want that out there. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to me. I guess the special sauce, it could be a chili sauce, it could be pretty much anything. So it's hard to say. But they also have a deep fried dish, which is fresh fault fish, toji style shrimp roll, squid, spicy cod roe, which is like fish eggs, zucchini, avocado, tempura sauce, and three kinds of salt. Um, so I think it's really interesting they like advertise like not just the protein, which is most common in America, to just kind of describe the protein and be like, oh, and then pick two sides type thing. But here they kind of go in depth and explain even like the slightest things, like three kinds of salt. I think that was cool. This one is teppanyaki. I think I'm saying that right. I'm not really sure. It's foie gras, butter, squirrel. So this is kind of like a more Americanized version because it is the Marriott. So it's like American dinner option. Well, not American, but like a more familiar, not like specified to Japanese, I would say. So then they just have the meal. A lot of things in, in Japanese don't like translate well into English, so then a lot of translators will just pick an alternate word. So here we have meal with garlic fried rice, miso soup, and pickles. Miso soup is like a fermented soybean product that they added to the broth, and that's what makes miso soup. And then we have last dessert, we have homemade soft chocolate with vanilla ice cream. So I would see that as like a Sunday type situation. Again, pretty Americanized. It's not really a traditional Japanese dish, but in Japan they're not really huge on dessert. They're more so focused towards like their normal food and then maybe like a fun like candy or something like that. They're not really dessert oriented as much as Americans are. So trends I've noticed, a lot of restaurants will try to create a clear broth for their like ramen or udon or anything like that. Um, they basically just skim away all the fat before they boil it, and then it'll make it clear. It does make it less rich in flavor, so I guess they compromise for that, but maybe it's like a also a trend to keep food like lighter. Um, going completely against that, we have dry aged sushi, which is not light at all. But so basically, they'll dry age the fish first.